think that we're all meant to be community people. I think that the extroverted and introverted are just labels. It's just that the people who are forcing themselves inside have not yet accepted themselves to step in, to lean forward, and that's a really scary place to be, but that's where the growth is. It's like the growth lies in the things you're avoiding.
You are your own greatest ally or enemy. Awaken the warrior within you. Take charge of your inner kingdom. Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast.
Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast, where we build mental strength to not only survive, but to thrive in this life. Today, we have a very special guest, a friend of mine, a trainer of mine. He's a performance coach, also a community leader and builder. We're gonna get into all interesting subjects under the moon and under the sun. Before you see him, don't be scared. He does look like a Viking, but he is very kind when he wants to. So today, he's very kind, and let's get to know him. George, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
How you feeling?
Feeling good, feeling grounded, feeling connected.
Amazing. What's with the Viking look?
I mean, I definitely have some Viking blood. Not Nordic descent directly, but you know, a lot of Irish and Scottish in there, and that there's been a lot of settlements in those areas. And my uncle did the reading the family tree, and there was a little bit in there for sure.
I'm not surprised.
It must just be the beard. I don't know. I'm growing the beard, you know?
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So tell me more before we dive deeper, but just so people can understand, you know, where you stand from. What do you do on a daily basis? Performance coach, community builder. You started the Warrior movement to kind of make a competition to the Warrior Growth Academy. You've started, or you co-created also Male Montreal. So tell us a little bit about these different projects and how does it all fit together?
Well said. I mean, when it comes down to all the community stuff that I'm part of, it's really been a big piece of my upbringing through my years to be connected to people socially, but also on like an intellectual, on a physical, on a spiritual level. I think community is a really big reason why we're all still here, obviously, and we've all been very tribe mentality people through the years. So for me, as an only child growing up, it was such a big piece of my journey to really connect and learn and grow in community. Through the lockdowns, there was a lot of calling inside me that was just so loud I couldn't silence it anymore. I couldn't, you know, dull the noise anymore. Essentially, I had to take action. The concept of male, it's actually, we call it now Male Movement. We dropped the MTL to make it more universal. Nice. This concept of brotherhood was such a needed thing that I saw somewhere about maybe 6-7 years ago, where from where I come from, I was a graffiti artist for many years. I dabbled in all kinds of wild activities growing up and was kind of on a drifted kind of raft. Where am I going to end up? I could see myself going in directions that felt unhealthy and dangerous. And there was quite a big kind of wake-up call that happened when one of my good friends passed away, and it kind of gave me this realization like, okay, so what do I want to do? From that point, I made a transition into really taking that physicality that I've always had and, you know, finishing my degree and focusing on my health and kind of making that shift. And quite a few years after that, I connected with this group of guys that I was like, man, these guys, they're so healthy. They're such warriors. They're such, you know, these are like top athletes. And it's like for the first time I felt connected to a group of guys that wasn't a gang, but it kind of was. We called it the alpha tribe or the alpha gang. We were like, or the flip gang. We would do parkour. We would, you know, do biohacking stuff. We would sauna for an hour back to back, like 15 minutes at a time. We did when I started my ice bath community, my first group ice bath outside of my rugby time when I was a kid in university was actually with them. And my point to say is that I realized that the concept of brotherhood that without being an only child, it was big. I didn't really feel that growing up. I created that, but the concept of men's work and, you know, connecting to the masculine fire and connecting to the self, it just didn't feel accessible. And I didn't really actually do too much research at the time. I was just like, this is something that I really want to create here in Montreal. So when 2020 hit, it was a big need, obviously through the situational challenges we were faced here. Lockdowns were really severe in Montreal. So started a workout group with a good friend. We were partners in that. And then from there, we kind of connected the dots, like, okay, how can we do more? And we connected with some other fellas in Montreal to create Male Movement. And that was kind of the beginning of so much more to come. Later, that led into the ice plunge community that I've been leading for the last 4 years in Montreal with the support of so many beautiful people in the city. And yeah, I think it's just really needed to be connected both to the self, to be able to lead the self, but also to be connected to other, to lead other, to be in service, to give back, to not be alone, to remember that we're never alone, never broken, and that we kind of all have each other's backs.
I love it. Just for the people listening, if ever they don't know, what basically George is doing is every Saturday, I think for especially the cold season, he and a group of people goes to the lake, no, the river. It's a river.
Yeah.
To the river, and they literally make a hole in the water, and they all cheerfully jump in the cold, ice freezing water, which is incredible, insane, and I love it. Tell me, because, you know, when we say community, what could be understood by that is, you know, kind of just circle of people you know and friends, right? So pretty much most of people have, you know, some friends from either the school years or maybe also some colleagues from work that they get along. Like, there is a difference, because I've experienced that with you in your groups and also different settings. There's a difference between a brotherhood per se, which is men only, but also just like that kind of community and kind of a social group. How would you differentiate those two?
I mean, I think in both a big theme that comes to mind is the concept of accountability and the acknowledgement piece. That's something that I think perhaps certain people have challenge with when it comes to like facing the shadow, for example, or facing the inner self that is perhaps dormant, or there's a part of, at least in my journey, that I was hiding from. I kind of have this analogy that we're brushing things under the rug for so long, and then we invite someone over and they're tripping over the rug. They're like, yo, what's up with this rug? You know? But it's like, I don't want to look under there because I don't even remember what I put there.
Yeah.
You know, so the concept of stepping into community is this. Let's say I have a big project that I've been working on for 10 years, but I've never brought it to anyone's eyes. You know, the line we share in Brotherhood is iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man. So the concept of stepping into community to bring ideas, to bring action, to bring awareness through, that we can then kind of support each other and grow collectively, because when a rising tide raises all ships. That's one of my favorite quotes. And when one man heals, we all heal, is something that is shared through the Sacred Sons community that I'm part of, another worldwide brotherhood. And then when you talk about community as a whole, you know, I think that every single person out here really wants to be seen and heard at a core level. I think growing up, it's a necessity to feel that, and at least in my story, I don't feel like I truly had that growing up, and I was called to create that for myself. And I think, without projecting my experience, I do think that it's a quite common experience to require those things. And in all of the men's groups and, you know, opening of the wound that I've experienced, or simply even just if we're talking about like men and women in a group or an activity, or we go watch a concert or something, you know, we're dancing to connect, we're dancing to feel part of something, and we want to be seen and heard in that. And then I kind of call the connection of the two being understood, you know? So when you're talking about differentiating a brotherhood, let's say, from like just a simple community, I do think that accountability is a big piece, So like walking with intention, bringing through the awareness, bringing through the concept of ceremony into every action, even brushing the teeth, washing the dish, every step we take. And then the acknowledgement piece. A good friend broke it down into 3 A's. There's the acceptance of the thing that perhaps needs to be worked on, or the thing you want to gain or access. There's building the awareness around that piece. So, acquiring the tools, let's say. And then the big piece that I think a lot of people have trouble is actually taking action, because we're so good at being in our head and thinking about the past and the future and worrying about what happened or what's coming. But the now is really the present, and it's in the body. The now is the body, the heart, the now, the experience, and the action piece takes moving the body to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really about, not hiding, stepping forward, leaning in, not being scared, being willing to see others, to listen. Again, something that I used to have trouble with, because I believe part of me didn't feel seen growing up, and working through that to then really connect and realize that the more I can be there for the other person, I'm literally in service, and that karmic unfolding allows them to feel like they can be there for someone else. So like together we get stronger. We're not alone. The wolves, the lions, we got them at our back, and like just knowing that they're there, it's like, oh yeah, I can do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And just circling back specifically on the men part, lately I've heard a study that was kind of comparing, and I might butcher slightly the angle of the study, but the bottom line will be clear and simple, that 30 or 40 years ago, each man had about, I think on average, 3 close friends. That we're not talking about just someone from work or like a friend that you just see on Friday night to watch football game, but really like close friends that you feel okay and comfortable sharing with, but asking for help, anything more like vulnerable or real and deeper. And in today day and age, so 2024, maybe the study was done in 2023, whatever, that number is 0. The biggest group, it doesn't mean on average Jesus. Men have 0 friends.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the group, the biggest chunk, so I think it was close to like 70+% of men had 0 close friend that, let's say you're in trouble or you're feeling down, you feel comfortable and you have someone to reach out to. So that for sure, I think, is not only alarming, but also a reminder, because I think for sure women are way more kind of in tuned naturally to, be more emotional, vulnerable, to also create those kind of circles, even naturally. But I think, men did, for whatever reason, that would be maybe something very interesting to study and to understand, but it kind of like drifted away. So what do you think, actually, whether you have the data or not, what do you think created that loneliness in men, but also on the other side, on the flip side, the need to be part of a brotherhood, which we see those movements becoming greater and stronger and beautiful? What do you think?
It's a great question. I've thought about this a lot, and we speak about this quite a bit through the circles I've been part of. And women are 3 times more likely to ask for help. That's the stat that we share. And with that, there's a part of the masculinity that we've been brought through, perhaps through tough love, or the old school kind of mentality that, we've been indoctrinated through the challenges our parents had faced. Sometimes things are shared about, the trauma that we experienced through our generation, the generational trauma. Sometimes it takes 3 generations to heal something massive, like, let's say, World War II, as an example. So like that passed down, like, I believe truly in this day and age, as we have so much access to information and technology and sharing and community, with that also being so connected to our phones and like not actually seeing each other, there's 2 extremes present. But with that, we as this generation, I truly believe we have such access to the opportunity to really shape the next who knows how long. And it's like, I kind of feel like there's a bit of responsibility, like it's really up to us. At least that's how I feel. That if I were to just give up and say, I'll just numb the rest of my life, it's like, then why would the next generation have anything to like look up to? And because of this reliant on technology that's continuously happening, it's like it's really up to us to set the ground and like connect on these emotional IQ levels to continue to expand this whole concept of brotherhood and sisterhood and union and community, and really show why we do this, why we've been gathering around the fire for thousands and thousands of years, and not losing touch of that why, because of so many reasons. But coming back to your point, I've actually reflected on this when I was part of that Flip Gang Alpha tribe thing I mentioned, like me and the boys, like of those guys, I could say probably 3 of those men I felt comfortable to really open up after like a big breakup or like a big challenge, and know that the advice would be compassionate and empathetic and perhaps not necessarily trying to fix me, but actually just simply reflect back what it is that I might be looking for, or ask good questions, or if it was an advice as well, that's always welcome. But it's through these brotherhood circles where like truly I have men around the world now that I've gained access to. Obviously there's some having to show up, there's time investment, there's sometimes some financial investment as well, these groups that you become part of, but the ripple effect, the takeaway is having this community that is worldwide, and in every big city there's someone you could reach out to say, yo, what's up, how do I get around in LA, how do I get around in New York, et cetera, there's always someone. So there's a big use case for simply that. But if we're talking about marriage, something that since I'm a kid, I've wanted kids since I'm 4.5 years old, and I've always wanted to build a family. I don't know why, it's always been there. And, to be the best father one day that I can be, the best husband, the best partner, the best, everything. I think that having an outlet of men to lean into, to ask for questions and ask for advice is imperative for survival. And for, let's call it, to thrive, because we're not here to be in survival anymore. It's time to let go of that story. The aloneness, that lone wolf is the dying breed. The concept of like the introvert, even that concept, I don't really prescribe to that concept of reality. I think that we're all meant to be community people. I think that the extroverted and introverted are just labels. It's just that the people who are forcing themselves inside have not yet accepted themselves to step in, to lean forward, and that's a really scary place to be, but that's where the growth is. It's like the growth lies in the things you're avoiding. And for me, commitment, I had trouble with that. Right now, for the last, let's say, 6 months of my life, I had a big promise that I made to several people, committing to commitment, simply avoiding nothing. So no matter what the resistance is, if I feel butterflies, if I feel strain, which is normal, similar to the ice water, every single time I show up, there's a I don't want to do it, but it's a reminder of I can do it. It's my choice. I have the power. I decide, kind of thing. And with that, I think honestly, a big misconception again, this brotherhood concept, this self-empowerment choice. A lot of people even look at therapy that it's for the weak. I actually haven't stepped into therapy yet, but I'm fully willing, and I'm about to step in very soon to that journey as a more like kind of architectural, very simple, perhaps some somatic therapy, letting go of some of the things I might have stored in my body through the things that experiences I've been through in the streets and beyond. But the concept of brotherhood, I truly think is something that every man should step into. I think it's needed, and I do not think that it could ever hurt, and will only have exponential gain. It's just something that I truly believe.
What mission are you on?
Mission, good question. I mean, I have the mission that I am calling through is a big one. I mean, I think that speaking and touching on what we're talking about, this concept of like the lions coming back, this like turning the streets into our own man-made jungle, and really bringing through the concept of nature and coming back to the people, coming back to the heart, and remembering that we're not alone. Like, you can't stop me when I'm with my people. You can stop me if I'm alone, and the lockdown showed that, right? But that's never going to happen again. I'm never going to let that happen again. And the mission I see is bringing strong men together, bringing strong women together, supporting the women, protecting the women, keeping them safe, stepping more into leadership, calling men more into this concept of taking our power back and like leading from the front, from the side, from the back, from all angles. And, truly, to be honest, it's bringing back the family. Coming from a broken home, growing up without brothers and sisters, had a pretty good lucky. I'm still very lucky with the journey that I was put into. At the same time, I really almost lost myself many times. So that concept of like, why a kid joins a gang, and why in jail, it's like 97% of men in jail don't have fathers. The suicide rates, it's still the number one killer of men in Canada. There's a lot of things of men. There's a lot of things that are yelling for a solution, but the mission of allowing men to really step back into themselves and reunite the family in a way where we're not fighting for who's boss. We're not fighting for who is going to take the trash out. There's a reason why it feels good to take care of women, I feel. It feels good. I don't need anything back, There's like this ripple effect that happens when perhaps it's an old school view, but the concept of roles. It doesn't mean old school woman stays at home and takes care of the family only, and men are the bread earner. It's like, but there's some things that I believe that I'm really good at, and I'm not as good at than the partners that I've dated, And the concept of how can I be of service to my children as best as possible without trying to do everything the best. Someone like David Goggins talks about how do the best at what you're good at. Stop trying to do everything. If you're not the smartest person, don't start trying to recite encyclopedia. Like, figure out what your niche is, what your skill is, and fucking kill that. So that's kind of the mission. It's a big mission, but
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, as much as you are able to explain it simply, but also get into it.
I'm like worked up. I'm like almost shaking.
Oh, I see it. I see it. And that's the beauty of, having, I don't want to say just the clarity, because then it feels like until you have almost pure crystal water clarity, you need to find it, because it's not true. Sometimes you can kind of just follow a gut feeling. Sometimes you can just follow, kind of what comes on your path. But for sure, I don't think there's anything, that can stop someone who's on a clear mission, that their heart, their soul, their head, everything is aligned and is screaming those words just as you were. This makes you unstoppable, and in the meantime, it is a beautiful experience. Because imagine you wake up in the morning, that there's a good chance that those dreams and these goals and this mission comes up to your mind. This is also something that might come to your mind when you go to sleep at night. This is obviously something beautiful to experience, and that puts you either in a calm and relaxed state and peaceful state because you're on the right path, or that when you wake up in the morning, you're fired up because you have a mission.
100%.
Right? So this is wonderful. So tell me because you've touched upon slightly on your upbringing. What is the hardest dragon you had to slay? The biggest challenge you had to overcome?
Biggest dragon I had to slay. Oh, I know. I mean, being an only child, with my parents split, growing up with my mom, having to become what's called the childhood adult, which is what we study in applied human relations, which is what I did my undergrad in. It's very important to understand that, to then kind of, for me, which is what I learned about this, and I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. I fell into a very big savior pattern very young, having to feel like I have to take care of my mother and kind of lead in that way and really, be the kind of feeling like the man of the house really young. A part of me had to kind of like shut down my younger childhood feeling of like, I can just be free and go play in the dirt. Of course I did that too, don't get me wrong. But this concept of the warrior is something that I feel like, the archetypes of the man can some people break it down as the warrior, king, magician, lover. I feel like, it's quite common that people step into their lover early. I feel like I had to shut down my lover kind of early to step into my warrior young. Now, with that, I feel like something I learned in a sweat lodge and my first Sacred Sons gathering at Convergence 7 in 2022, that there was this fella leading, he was saying the prayers and, leading the song. He just had such a warrior essence, but he was so connected to his emotion. And he was so willing to shed tears, but then really step back into service immediately. Whereas in my past, from that point, when I would feel emotion come, it would be like a waterfall, because I was literally just suppressing it and suppressing it. And something that was said that weekend a lot was that if you're doing something from fear and not from love, you're going to burn out, no matter what it is. And I was like, and I just kept thinking about that. And I was like, that makes sense. That makes sense. I kept hearing it, other guys saying it. And then in that sweat lodge moment, I realized that this guy was one of the first warriors, like fucking warriors, neck tat, just fucking looks like a dangerous assassin, Hawaiian dude, was a warrior and his lover. So it made me, and then I had this reflection when I left the sweat lodge that my whole life I've been a warrior in my fear. So the dragon that I had to slay was that I've been fighting because I felt like I have to, not because I can. It felt like more of a burden than it was ever a choice. And I made the right choices, but I was acting from lack. I was acting from fear. I was acting from glass half empty energy rather than glass half full, and like striving to become that overflowing cup, which I didn't get for such a long time. And yeah, it was just, and all leading to the fact that when I was a kid, that concept of feeling so helpless and so alone was something that I was essentially a victim of my situation. And the being a warrior in fear was me essentially trying to run away from the victim in me. And the victims I met, whenever I would meet someone and their victim, I would literally just like cut them off. I was like, stay away from me, please. I don't want it to poison my fire. And that's fear, as opposed to that moment where I had to slay the dragon. I kind of had this vision of the blazing phoenix rising from the ashes, because they gave me a rock from the sweat lodge, and I threw it into a rock a couple days later before this retreat was done, and it burst into ashes. And I was like, wow, that's like the blazing phoenix rising from the ashes. I was like, oh, this is okay. This is core memory created, But yeah, it was a very interesting unfolding that I realized that in that moment I was still in my victim, even though people might see me as this warrior my whole life. It was in that point that I stepped back into my heart and back into the feminine that I was suppressing all along. Because if you connect the dots, single mother, having to take care of her, I feel like I really disconnected from the feminine. And this, brotherhood leading for the masculine. I'm at this men's gathering. I'm like, men, masculine, fire, warrior. But it's like I wasn't actually in touch with my creative, with my listening, with my care, with my compassion, with my empathy as much as I could be. So it was a big rebalancing of the equilibrium, the yin yang,
That's beautiful, because actually that was kind of the first image that came to my mind when I first came to a male event is it was really at its purest form, the vulnerability and the authenticity and the sharing and the owning everything, all your, let's say, darkest secrets or things you're uncomfortable saying. And also the yang, the full-on masculinity, tug of war, you know, and pushing things and like all the physical challenges, but then yet you kind of interlace the other side. Was this intentional? Is there kind of a certain logic of bringing those two together? Is it kind of in the image of how we should, in a way, let's say, live our life on a daily basis, kind of, you know, between those two polarities?
Good question. I love these questions. You're a fucking good question asker, I gotta say.
Thank you. I'm curious.
So something that I heard a good friend say is that everything starts and ends with the feminine. I really like that. Maybe she created it, or maybe she got it from someone else. But I really, really like that because we come out of the mother womb and we die into Mother Earth. Ooh. Right? So with that, the invitation comes from the feminine. If I'm seeing a pretty lady on the bus and I come in and say, "Hey, you're so pretty, my name's George," she's gonna be like, "Whoa, calm the fuck down." But if I'm calm and patient and I slowly just show my presence and I'm here, once the feminine acknowledges the presence of the masculine presence, the feminine kind of, the body language changes and there's like an opening and you can feel it. At least I believe I can feel it. And that is the moment that it's like, you're welcome, right? Which is why a lot of people these days are now talking about, where does the leadership even come from? Is it, you know, we see the men with the spears, but what's the feminine doing? You know, if we look at the household, the women lead most of the decisions that happen out of the household, which is the central organism of everything. Like, what am I doing it for? I'm doing it for my family. You know, the family that I don't even have yet. I'm doing all of this for that. You know, and it's just very interesting the entry. So I've heard people talk in this empowerment space that the access to the masculine actually comes through the portal of the feminine. So it's like through the essence that we can gain the most connection to of their power and our might and our fire comes through the softness. You know, it comes through the silence. You know, it comes through the listening. It comes through the being. You know, like Bruce Lee. Like, think about his concept of just really being present in that moment. He's not really doing anything in that moment. He's actually in his feminine. He's just being. So, you know, it's the same thing as like the guy in the streets who's yelling and trying to show his armor is usually the weaker of the two fighters, but the calm, present person, you don't want to fuck with that guy, you know?
Absolutely. You just brought up Bruce Lee. That's one of my biggest inspirations. And it's beautiful because, just to follow through what you were saying, he says that real stillness is stillness in movement. So if you think about, let's say, a piece of wood flowing on the water, the wood is strong, right? But it's letting the water flow. And it's also, obviously, I think pretty much everything that Bruce Lee said was always as much applicable for life, so that's the philosophy side, as much applicable for martial arts. That's the, you know, the fighting side. And, you know, he many times talked about his style of fighting, which he described as it's the style of fighting of no fighting. Or I don't know if that's how he framed it, but it's basically that idea of you're not attacking, you're letting the flow of the movement of the opponent come, and you are just using that energy and striking, not even back, but just like even letting your body respond naturally to that attack. And it's not about just being passive and receiving the hits. It's still about the fighting, of course, in the case of martial arts, but it's that beauty of the flow. And I don't know if it's him who said it. I think so, yeah. But so I don't want to say it's Bruce Lee because just in case I'm mistaken. But it was said that in the beginning, the person that doesn't know fighting thinks there's one style of punch. Then, as he or she learns the art of fighting, they realize there's 1,000 style of punch, from the left uppercut with right. And then finally, the expert who has mastered the art realizes there's one style of punch. So that's very profound. I don't know if you kind of got it, but initially it kind of doesn't make sense. But basically what it means, in my opinion, is that the one style of punch is when that punch follows the flow and the action, instead of being like, oh, as soon as he moves to the left, I'm going to go with the fake jab and then uppercut. You're putting the labels on those things. You're being attacking. Whereas if you just let it come, you let it flow, you're in the real stillness and you're calm, as you were describing. Well, then, why do you even label a punch? It's going to come as it's supposed to, because you're following the movements, the flow, right?
It makes me think about love.
Most probably.
Because if you think about, like, in a relationship, when someone's like, hey, what are we? Are we this? Are we that? The labels, right?
Yeah.
Labeling. Mm-hmm. The concept of labeling is categorizing, putting it in boxes. But the love is going to depict how the love is meant to unfold, right? And you know when it's the connection is real. So it's very interesting. Like it's like you're like this still being. The punch comes or the love comes, whatever it is, it comes, and you move with it. Mm-hmm. So it's still the one punch, the one. It's interesting.
Very interesting. Cool. To be digging more.
Yeah.
What haven't we talked about today that you wanted to talk about or mention?
I mean, we were talking about Bruce Lee just now. I touched on a memory that, since this is the Warrior Growth Academy, it would be cool to share. The 3 stages of a warrior. And the first stage is having a reason to fight, okay? Which is a very understandable concept. The second stage is acquiring weapons and gaining, let's say, support. And the third stage is realizing there wasn't a war to begin with. So it's like you only realize that there isn't a fight when you stop throwing the punches. So it kind of relates to the Bruce Lee thing. Mm-hmm. And I find it's very fitting for like this concept of surrender, letting things flow, letting things come through. Even if it's, in a concept of meditation, the idea comes in without identifying to it and labeling it and then fixating on it. It's like letting it come and letting it pass, coming back to the breath. If it's like a trigger in a relationship or in a business, this dynamic or something, a traumatic response, it's like learning how to let the feeling come and not tensing and fighting it, but then letting it, breathing through and letting it pass, bringing it awareness to it. Gabor Mate recently released a podcast where he talks about bringing attention to the tension, and like that blew my mind. I've been saying it ever since, and it's like, yeah, I mean, when we talking about, as I was mentioning, the past and the future, and coming back to the body and that mind-body connection, bringing the attention to the actual source. Finding the source also is hard enough, but having that mind-body connection, the mental awareness, the emotional capacity, the emotional intelligence, the EQ, to connect and to identify and speak what is that feeling. And it feels simple, but it's actually one of the hardest things I think that we are faced with. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lifelong journey. I'm still on the path, and I think we all are. I think it's a
forever.
It's a forever thing.
Yeah, 100%. And just to maybe give even an extra analogy or even just a fun fact, the samurais, which are kind of ancient warriors, or one of the ancient warriors, were exactly known for practicing and wanting to master as much the body as the mind, because that's only then that you can be a master of war. Obviously, samurais were mainly kind of, let's say, the end goal was specifically, for the fighting part, but they realized through Zen practices with obviously some Buddhist monks that you cannot be a great warrior. You cannot be great in action if you didn't master your mind. And attention or awareness is one of the biggest skills, I believe, of the mind. There's obviously more, but this is, again, I think almost everything seems to work either in circles or in kind of polarities coming together and balancing, right? We were speaking about so many different things, men only, men and women, brotherhoods, emotions, and also, the warrior spirit. So it all seems to have this kind of very simple reality of having those polarities coming together.
Totally, and it reminds me of, like, again, the mind, body, soul, like the Trinity concept of, and something that I experienced, and then I learned a little bit more about it talking to other people in this conscious community, these spiritual teachers, spiritual teachings also, that like some people might take the avenue of the mind and the spirit, kind of like the connection of that piece to get into eventually come back to the body and work with the body. But what a lot of people do, such as myself, is going to the body first and work and do hard things and train to then have access to the mind and then work in there and unlearn coping mechanisms and all these things. And it's like in my journey, as I started doing all this men's work stuff, I realized I was so with the consciousness, or trying to work with that. I actually completely let go of my body. I wasn't out of shape, but I stopped training as hard. I thought, I was like, it must be about ego dissolution. And I stopped training because I was like, well, if muscles equals ego, I have to dissolve that, right? Like that's like the lower level understanding that I had. And it was actually through these sacred sun circles, these like ritual combat where they put us in and they make us put gloves on and we fight 2 minutes, low level, but still it can be intense. I got into boxing and I started to get back into the physical, and it was like, wow, it was actually kind of like the journey of leaving the body, working with the body, leaving the body, coming back to the body, where I was like, okay, now I can unify the two, the polarity to access the soul. That's my experience. Perhaps it doesn't apply to everybody, but I felt that was very supportive for me.
Yeah, we all have different and unique experiences, but I think absolutely there is a commonality and also maybe some universal truths, or at least, similar elements that we all, experience on our own time and in our own way. Brother George, there has been a huge pleasure and honor. We could go on for hours, but every good thing has an ending, but at the same time, this is just the beginning of our journey together. We didn't even talk about it much, but George has an incredible class on Warrior Growth Academy. It's the Warrior Activation. It's an incredible workout that is as much intense, some sessions. The others are more releasing, more just empowering from all types and shapes and forms. So make sure to check it out. Trust me, I've tried throughout the years many types of workout, and George's technique and kind of way of putting different ways of approaching fitness and just physical health is incredible. Also, make sure to subscribe to not miss any of those incredible conversations and episodes, and I'll see you at the next one.